behaviors that we want our students to have done. Okay, so with that, please join me in welcoming our Commissioner Elia and Regent.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for being here. I know, as Dr. Aquino pointed out, we tried to get a time that we could come to Rochester, and for the school people in this room, this is not an early time. But for others, it may be a little earlier than your norm, and I just want to thank you for taking the effort to be here with us. As Dr. Aquino pointed out, this is one of several. Our plan would be that we would have meetings at different times, so we've done one morning one, so other meetings that we have will be at other times in the day, and allow parents and community groups to be able to organize and have members come for a similar conversation about what was in the report related to the Rochester School District, and kind of get some of your questions answered on what we know so far. In response to Dr. Aquino setting up the kind of stage for this meeting, we will go for a few, I would say probably until about 20 to 9. So that would be about a half hour with our comments. And then I know that when people are out here and you're paying attention and you've done the things that you need to do to understand why we're here, you have questions. And so your questions are something that we want to focus most of our time on. So we will, from about 20 to 9 until about 9:30, we will answer your questions, and as Dr. Aquino said, we are open to the questions on cards, etc., and we'll try to get back to you that way. At about 9:30, we will end the session. We'll have the other meetings scheduled, and so they will be at those times, and you will, that'll be put out publicly, so anybody can come and be at those meetings as well. So,
most of you all know me, and you know that not only can I talk, but I love to talk. But I'm not going to do that because my purpose here is to listen. But I would like to use this as a moment to just thank the Commissioner for being here. I've had the opportunity to serve the Board of Regents with a number of different commissioners, and this commissioner stands out to me because of the amount of time and the number of visits that she makes to Rochester, at my request, at community request, and at her own initiative. And I've been with her in early morning meetings like this. I've been with her in late night meetings. And I have never seen her fail to display what I think is the most important characteristic that we can all display in that norm that Dr. Aquino referenced. And that is a love for children, a respect for teachers, and an understanding of the magical power of instruction to change the life of children. I grew up right off of Genesee Street, and it is very clear to me that everything I am is the result of the grace of God Almighty and a good education. And the foundation of that education was laid in the city school district at school number 29. And so I really thank Dr. Aquino for his work. I believe that his report has set the basis for meaningful, substantive conversations, for planning that's effective, and I hope for transformative action that will offer my grandchildren the educational opportunity that I had as a city school district student. Before I be quiet, I would just like to thank you all for amending the plan of having the session in at 9:30. I am the presenter at a 10 o'clock event, and you all know I am not afraid to show up to stuff late. I generally do all the time, but when I have to present, I have to be on time. So I really need to try and run out of here no later than 25 minutes in order to be where I need to be at 10. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Regent Norwood. So let me set the stage a little bit for you. In August of 2018, I appointed Dr. Aquino to come to Rochester as a distinguished educator. The purpose of that was to support the district in areas where we had seen specific needs for improvement related to systems, the structures and the operations, and clearly is to underscore the significant gaps that we were seeing in student achievement and the provision of services to students. I'm going to say some things that are not they're not a new item for many of you. Rochester schools have the second lowest 4-year, 5-year, and 6-year graduation rates of any district in New York State, with 30 plus students in a cohort. So any place where there's 30 plus students in a cohort, Rochester is in the lowest group. Rochester had the lowest combined English language arts and mathematics performance index in the state at elementary and middle level. And at the high school level, only one district performed at a lower level than Rochester. Rochester had the highest percentage of schools identified as priority. 54% of the schools in Rochester were priority schools in the state in 2017. And the district is one of only 5 in the state in which 20% or more of the schools have been placed in receivership, and one of only 3 school districts with a school in receivership that has failed to make demonstrable improvement. Rochester is currently classified as a district in need of intervention under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, and is required to implement a corrective action plan. And issues have been identified regarding the provision of services to English language learners as a result of the state ed's monitoring visits to the district, and the department expects to issue a corrective action plan in the next few months. So that was really the reason that a distinguished educator was identified for Rochester. I'm not saying that those things are exactly the same right now, but at a snapshot in time, in the summer of 2018, that was the case. And as Regent Norwood has mentioned, I have been to Rochester many times. I know many of you in this room. In fact, when I came up and talked to you, you introduced yourself by saying, and I'm looking at this lady right here, she was the head of a summer school program within a month of me coming to New York as a commissioner in 2015, and I visited that summer school program. She has since become a principal, and I do know Rochester. Many of you don't know this, but I was born in the Runaway, and my family lived in Rochester for 2 or 3 decades. And I left Rochester when I was very young. However, it always was my parents' favorite place. So here we are. We make a decision to put a distinguished educator in. And Dr. Aquino had very specific directions from me about coming into Rochester and putting together a report that would outline recommendations in areas where it's clear with changes in those particular those work plans and workflows, we could see changes in this district. Now, I've been an educator for almost 50 years, and I will tell you, the only reason that I've been in education is to support kids. And for many years, and for those of you who have seen the report that Dr. Aquino produced and looked at the attachments, we have attachments that go back years in Rochester saying these are the things that are wrong. And when you get to the point where you have that kind of shaky foundational work, we know that we aren't doing the best we can do in Rochester for children. And I think Regent Norwood said it well, that's the reason that we are here. This is really to try to refocus and figure out a path forward for Rochester. And I think all of you in this room know the improvements and what needs to occur, put a major focus on children, is not going to happen overnight. It has to be a consistent view of putting children first and other things in the back burner or off the page to be able to just move forward. And until we get to that point, then we honestly don't have a chance in Rochester. Because history has told us, reports have been done, and things haven't changed. And so I'm going to ask Dr. Aquino to go through some of the key elements, particularly around the issues of student achievement, around the issues of systems work that needs to be supported, and of the issues of governance. And as we do that, I need you to be thinking about how you, as an individual in this community, can accept the fact that we're calling it out as it is. And after that, once we can get there and we lay that foundation, then we can move forward to figure out, okay, what are we going to do for the next steps? So, and Dr. Aquino, if you would focus on some of the key elements and remember our main goal is to get to their questions.
Yeah. So first, as you know, my review highlighted serious concerns regarding the academic, operational, and fiscal condition of the district. And as I said, the district is in dire need of improvement. I want to read you a quote that is in the conclusion because I think it summarizes it, and it came from one of the parents in my focus group, and his grandmother passionately stated, "We are bleeding. We cannot take another hit. Very soon we won't even have one good elementary school in the district." So I think that sums up the situation of the district. The concerns that, and if I have to summarize, the concerns of paramount importance for all stakeholders that my review found was first, the board's lack of understanding between the difference of governing body and management, and its inability to act as a unified body was one of the major concerns. The high leadership turnover, this went beyond only the superintendent. I will tell you, this is typical in urban when the superintendent's tenure is about 2 to 3 years. But what is unique to Rochester is that you go to the second level of leaders, deputy superintendent, chiefs, and school chief, and there's a high level of turnover that I have not seen in other districts. A community of low expectation for its student that was rooted, as many stakeholders said to me, in a deep history of institutional racism. There's a lack of sense of urgency, as the commissioner indicated, demonstrated by all the reports that have been done and no progress. Case in point, special education. There have been just too many reports and very little action in improving the service for students with IEP. A district that pays little attention to teaching and learning when the primary focus of a district as an educational institution is academics. A district crippled by a culture of fear and intimidation, and a system that lacks accountability at all levels. Not accountability in a sense of punitive, but just in terms of the work is getting done and that you're delivering results for the student. And obviously, a district that is facing a structural budget deficit that has been highlighted many, many times, but there's not been a long-term financial plan to address that. So there is the potential that nothing is done. In a couple of 3 years, you might have massive layoffs. Just think about the implication that has for the students. And finally, and more important, is that the decisions in this district seem to be based on the interest of adults, not on what is in the best interest of children. And that has to change. I think those are the major pieces of the issues that my review found. And I think now we want to open it up.
Let me just say a couple words. I think we all, the three of us, clearly know that there are many dedicated educators in this district. And so when we're saying these things are evident in Rochester, what we're really saying is that the structures around those dedicated people aren't supporting the things that need to be supported for children. So, as I've said, I've been in schools, I've seen people working really hard to work with children. I've seen implementations of programs that may or may not have been implemented well so that they really have the opportunity to bring the changes and the supports for kids. But in no way is this a pointing of a finger at any one person or any one set or group of individuals. And I think that's what we all need to accept, that this isn't a single person. This isn't a single group. You have dedicated educators, you have dedicated principals, you have staff at all levels who are keeping things moving. The problem is they aren't moving in a direction that is supporting outcomes that are positive for kids. And I mentioned to you, this isn't going to get fixed overnight. It has to take a strong, what is best for children. Then we all need to keep that focus laser sharp, moving in the right direction. And so we want to be able to say, we can change this. But all of you know some of the changes are not going to be an easy change. And I certainly know that as a commissioner. I know that our regions are fully aware of that. But we need to, at this point in time, not have just another report that goes on a desk or on a shelf somewhere that nobody does anything about. So I think it's fair to say that we are committed to get the changes going in Rochester, and that we are not going to sit back and not let that happen, and not make it happen. But we also know this community has to be with us to do that, because things aren't, when you have to make a change and things have been very embedded in systems for a long time, people think that you are attacking them, and it isn't. It really isn't that. It's just that the system that has held up for things here in Rochester is not the one that is going to support children.
And I want to underscore that in my introduction to the report, I make it very clear that this was not an indictment of individuals, but this was, if you want to put blame, you have to put blame on the system. It's a failure of the system. And my report also mentioned that I was impressed with many hardworking, talented individuals that I encountered in the district. But I'll give you an anecdote. I had somebody here, a staff member, who actually asked me, Jaime, will you tell me if I were doing a lousy job? And I immediately said yes, but I thought that this person was asking me as if I were the superintendent. And then I retracted and said, oh, wait a minute, are you asking me in my role as a distinguished educator? Said yes. Obviously, this is a person that established a relationship. I said, well, that's not my role, that's the role of your supervisor. But because we have established a relationship, I can give you feedback first. As a supervisor, I would never tell anybody that they're doing a lousy job. You know, I would give you feedback. And I ended up saying, you're doing a very good job, and gave her concrete feedback. But I also said, it doesn't matter how good you are. You are working in an ecosystem that is totally broken. So no matter how good you are, it doesn't translate to effective result on behalf of kids. And if it does, it's so minimal. But that's not because of you. It's because of the ecosystem being so broken and needs to be fixed.
I thank you. I was trying to remain silent. I would just affirm the comments as we make the bridge. I am very much aware of the fact that I've been involved in public life since 1984. And I spent 16 years on city council voting on budgets. So I say I am part of this as well. And I own my own history and contributions. But I think it's important that we remain ever mindful that this is about systems and systemic problems. And it's not just the school district, but it's all of the systems and domains that touch children. And it's been a problem for a long time. And many of you came into this knowing that and have been working to repair it. Our challenge has been we have not been engaging in repair in a systematic manner. We have not been doing it as a true community endeavor, and the time has come for us to do so. I am looking at the end of my less than stellar career. It began young, and I really know I'm getting old. And when the history of this time is written, I would really like that history recorded, that I was part of making a difference. And so I'm here today to listen and learn, to help fill in any of the gaps where you are looking to listen and learn, but also to start a dedication within this community that we will hand this district and this city to our children, not only not less, but better and more beautiful than it was handed to us.
All right.
So the way we're going to do this, if we can have, if we're interested in asking questions, if you can line up here in the center aisle or over there, and Ms. Turner will be on that side, and Dr. Owens will be here, and they'll alternate. Would you want to be there? And then here, and Tony will be around collecting questions. Tony, if you have a question, you can bring them to us as well. Yes, sir.
If you could introduce yourself, please, and if you're with an organization or part of the school district. I know we have a number of our administrators and some of our teachers here, so if you could please identify that. Sir?
Greetings, Commissioner Elia. Hello, Dr. Aquino and Regent Norwood. My name is John Rodriguez, and I've been a champion of public education here in Rochester since 1980. I've had the opportunity, sometimes pleasure, of working with about a dozen or so superintendents here in Rochester, Washington, D.C., and Michigan, and countless school board members over that 30-year period. My question has to do with selecting a leader of leaders. In my professional work, I'm an organizational development practitioner and have been fortunate enough to work with organizations of tens of thousands of employees. And so looking at leaders and the leaders of leaders is a question that's on my mind often and has been a question on my mind here in Rochester. So what I'm wondering about in the time I've been here, the superintendents we've had, Commissioner, have mostly been educators, almost 100% educators. That is to say, they've gone on from high school to college in education, from college to teaching, from teaching to some kind of administrative certification, from there to some kind of hopefully administrative experience, maybe a principal, and some of them have become superintendents. And that trajectory in most industries doesn't exist. In most industries, people vary and change, would bring different backgrounds and experiences to the role of being a leader of leaders. When they land here as superintendents, Commissioner, they're now responsible for everything from finance to IT to HR to logistics, transportation, food, union relations, advocacy, political, community, and some education and academic responsibilities. So my question is, we want to try something different. What can you do? There is some precedent for this. Working with SUNY and working with the Chancellor of SUNY to open up that process of selecting a superintendent so that we can consider candidates that maybe have some education experience in their backgrounds and history, but are not necessarily certified by the state of New York. But they do have the capacity and the demonstrated track record of having led leaders. So I'm not talking about a Superman or a Superwoman.
Right.
I'm talking about the executive experience that is earned over time to manage people that lead others and the functional areas associated with a complex, large urban school district.
So I think your statements are clearly an issue that boards wrestle with all the time. Okay, how do I get someone that has skills in different areas? And then, are they the type of person that can bring in some of the specialists in some of the areas you mentioned? The selection right now, as you know, is usually done with a selection firm that supports that search for a leader for a district, and then the person's work that they've done in their life and in their career is part of that selection. So if you are asking, am I going to move away from the requirements of a quality educator in the midst of a search, I'm not changing that rule right now, but no one has requested that we have something that isn't that, and I would be open within the requirements that I have as the commissioner to look at anything like that. I would agree with you. The leader is a very, very critical position. What we saw, and if you've had the opportunity to read the report, there are many areas within this district and within the governance structure that are problematic. And we, like the board and like this community, will demand a quality person to be the leader here. So thank you very much for coming today.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm Laurel Avery Vitoy, and I am honored to say that I am principal at school number 8, Roberto Clemente. And a big shout out to all of the principals and administrators here today, because I know I don't do this work alone, I do it together. So we are stronger together than we are apart. I have had the pleasure of working with School 8 and under the titleship of a receivership school. We have received information that we are moving forward. My question is how do we build capacity? Because the reality is that we know, unfortunately, many of our schools are moving in that direction, which saddens my heart. But the piece that's more important is the receivership schools have been able to show the growth necessary to move forward with the support of the district, the commissioner, our whole team. It isn't one. So that is my question. What kind of transition plan can we put in place to help, one, the schools that are making progress move forward off of the receivership list, and then support the newest schools that will be coming towards that journey, and how do we do it well for children? That's it. That's all I got today.
I think that's a really important point. I mentioned to you the statistics that identify schools that are having more difficulty than others in the state, and those are at various levels. We've had certainly our school that we currently have under receivership. We're watching very carefully. Our staff is here working very closely with the principal, who I know happens to be in the audience. I want to point out that that is a key element in moving forward. When you make a commitment and when you can make those changes occur that are really tough to move, then you need to continue to get support. And I would mention there's board members in the room and administrators here. I think we all understand that the journey may have started, but it is not over.
Oh, yeah.
And you have not reached the end goal of total success for every child in that Roberto Clemente school of yours. And so what we've got to do is make sure that that transition plan is strong and that resources are not pulled out that helped you to get there. Well, thank
On the index card, so that's taken care of, but I want to read a comment from somebody, and she did identify herself, so I know the individual, and I know it's a community activist and parent, so I'm not going to say her name because I don't know what, but her comment reads, the most important thing is the achievement of our students. In my opinion, conversation now needs to be focused on how the board is working together collectively to resolve the recommendations given by Dr. Aquino. We cannot continue to be afraid to get rid of things that are not working.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and I'm just going to turn for a second because I always feel that this should be addressed to everyone when we're up here talking and not just up front, so bear with me a second with my back being turned. I'm Jacqueline Sprague. I am a resident. My family has been here since the 1820s. We are connected to the Frederick Douglass family, and so therefore my great-great-great uncle and aunt are Nathan Sprague and Rosetta Douglass Sprague. We've had a vested interest in this community since we have been here. It is extremely important that in everything we do, we put the children first and the parent caretaker. We need to examine what we are doing with our Title I funding, the process on how we are using that funding individually in schools equitably across the district. We need to be able to break down the barriers of intimidation of people not coming to school meetings and not being involved in school meetings because they're being shut out in ways that are not fair to them. We have excellent educators and administrators that are doing a good job. It is a systemic problem, an absolute systemic problem. It will take time, but whatever is put in place is not going to work unless we do a better job of engaging parents. A primary example is so many people on Facebook said, I cannot make this meeting. It's in the daytime. I have to work. And you find that is a systemic issue all the time in the district. The timing of the meetings, if an analysis was done on the percentage of people that attend, you would be amazed at how few people attend because of the timing. And we have to find ways to engage people from different social-economic groups so they do not feel intimidated and they're part of the group. I'm giving total accommodations to you as our leaders, to Vicki Gouveia, the principal of the school, and of course to Janine Rella, and look for very good things from the PTA led by Janine, because we are going to push and fight and get what is needed for that school, and we want to work collaboratively with the leadership and with schools across the district. Thank you.
Thank you.
And there was a similar question relating to parent engagement says how we parent caretakers can be more involved in parent engagement. The process intimidates and isolates families and creates them as non-customers, and how and when will parents or caretakers have input on how Title I parent engagement funds are used in the schools and across the district. That was a finding in my report, and there's actually a clear recommendation for the district first to restructure the district parent advisory council, restructure how the parent liaisons and home assistant, as well to have a more robust parent engagement process. So that's in the report as a strong recommendation for the board and administration.
Thank you.
Morning.
Good morning.
My name is Shira May, and I'm the Executive Director at Partners in Restorative Initiatives. We are not-for-profit that partners closely with RCSD, and I get to work closely with the wonderful Ruth Turner and the Route Restorative team. As you know, the New York State Department of Education issued guidance on social emotional learning in August of this year, and part of that is the principle of improving school culture and climate using a restorative practices approach. And for those who aren't familiar with restorative practices, one of the principles is people are more productive and more likely to make positive change when people do things with them rather than to them or for them. And what I'd like to share is I got to attend the International World Conference on Restorative Practices, which was held in Detroit. And the city of Detroit has embraced this philosophy of restorative practices for its city systems as well as the entire school district. The superintendent and the mayor were both there at this conference. My question is, are you considering thinking about restorative practices as a model for addressing system-wide change in the district? And I'm addressing Dr. Aquino's comments that you've seen a culture of fear and intimidation and lack of accountability, as well as low expectations and a history of institutional racism. So I want to ask if that's a consideration, and is that something you have thought about working with our partners? I also want to comment, we have a number of partners in the community, the Gandhi Institute, Center for Youth, Center for Dispute Settlement, and Pathways to Peace that are fully invested in this effort.
Right, and so we obviously, State Ed has taken a very strong position on social emotional learning. It's a key part of the move on our plan as we move forward in our ESSA plan. And I would say to you that that is a strategy that we as the State Ed Department will be doing available training for staffs across the state to be able to implement. But that is a local decision on whether they do it. I personally, like you, feel like that is an approach that really is respectful of all voices and people in the communities. So if Rochester, as they move forward, includes that as one of their strategies, it certainly will be something that I think, as you pointed out, they have a number of partners here that can help. I do want to point out one other thing. The reason that this meeting is at the time that it is, and I mentioned that when I first came in, we will have multiple meetings here, and I also want to point out our other regent, Andrew Brown, because he represents Rochester as well, would have been here but had a scheduled meeting out of town. The question was, were we going to have a meeting, or were we, and knowing that we had other meetings, were we going to be here? And obviously the people in this room were able to make it. So it gave us an opportunity so that we could come and begin this dialogue. But it is by far not the last time that myself, Regent Norwood, and Regent Brown, who unfortunately couldn't join us today, but will be at all the other meetings that we have here in Rochester, with Dr. Aquino, will be here to talk to the community. So,
And the other opportunities will vary in terms of time of
Absolutely,
day.
yes.
They will not always be started in the morning.
and some of them will not, we're not going to do the middle of the day, so everybody can understand that, but we will do times at the end of the day, because I know sometimes parents would prefer to do something from a 4 to a 6 time than a 7 to a 9 time. Others would like the 7 to 9. So we're going to vary the times, understand that. This is one we could made sure we could be here for this, to start this off, so that all of you who are impatient to know what is the next step could hear, we're here, we're listening, and we're going to continue to do that. So if you would please tell anyone who couldn't make it today, and I do understand that in fact, we're anxious to be out here and we'll be talking with them. Thank you for your time.
And just so that people understand the process in terms of, it is the responsibility of the Board of Education in Rochester to come up with a plan they would use to address the recommendation, which will be submitted to the commissioner by February 8th. So they will decide what actions they will take to address the culture of fear, and if they wanted to use partners, the commissioner and her team will review and decide whether those actions are appropriate.
Good morning. My name is Aria Lind. I'm a parent to 3 children in the district, a high schooler at School of the Arts, and 2 elementary school children at Dr. Walter Cooper Academy, school number 10. I'm also a consultant to a funder in the community who provides whole child health policy systems and practices redesign, implementation support in RCSD elementary schools. I have 2 questions. I might talk a little bit more about who's facilitating this change management. What can we expect around the culture change in the change management? And what kind of accountability is infused into the change management? And then my second question is, I'm interested to hear you talk more about strategies and recommendations for addressing the structural racism embedded into our district.
So let me address the change management. Any of us that have gone through change know that sometimes we like the change and sometimes we really don't. And very often, the reason that we do or don't is the way that it's done. And so one of the things that we believe is going to be very important that the board should be thinking about as they're putting together the plan that they'll submit to State Ed and myself, that plan should include how to do some of the things that have already been mentioned. Let's use the example of community involvement. What we heard from Dr. Aquino and what we are hearing here in several comments was that there's not been community involvement, parent involvement, and in fact, in many places, the parents don't believe that they are welcome and don't believe that the community voice as another part of that is something that is valued. How we get there is something that's got to be very much a part of the work that is done by this district and should be identified in the plan that comes to State Ed. It's not just we're going to do several things and there are different programs. It's how we're going to do it. Because I would venture to say that all of the plans over the last 10 to 12 years that were implemented may have been started, but there was no consistent approach to continuity of program and implementation that would have supported those continuing and sustaining themselves. So that concept of how to do it has got to be embedded in what it is that the board believes is the best approach to respond to the recommendations in the report.
I have a follow-up question to that. To my knowledge, none of the Board of Ed members are experts in change management, and change management for a billion-dollar organization is a hefty lift. So I wonder what if this panel will come with further recommendations for how to support the Board of Ed to use meaningful change management models.
So what you said and the decision that you've identified is not a decision that the commissioner makes in the school district. It is a decision of the school district. And the community members and the parents and all of the people that work in the district work with the board, and the board needs to see that we need to do some changes, but how are we going to do that? And what is the timeline for that? And how are we going to include what clearly was part and called out in the report, that we don't have community involvement and parent involvement and voice as we move forward. So that needs to be addressed, and it's in the report as well as the recommendations.
It is in the report, Barry, and I'm so glad you mentioned that you do have two commissioners here, Commissioner Parmont and Commissioner Funches.
And I think we have others in the back as well.
You had,
Yes.
Commissioner Shepherd, and you had Commissioner and Vice President Powell was here too. But you also have some of the senior administration. I saw Deputy Superintendent Massetti Miller and Deputy Superintendent Dr. Golden are here because the recommendation does call, one of the recommendations call for a change management process. In my findings, I give an example when it came to the elimination of the administrators of special ed and how there was a lack of the change management process and what that calls for the schools and for the students, and that district needs to avoid doing that as they implement all the changes that are required. But as the commissioner said, that is up to the board and the administration. But it is a strong recommendation that they do that. Just like when you said about institutional racism, the district, to be fair, and I do give them credit, they have done a lot on anti-bias training. One of the recommendations is that there has to be a mechanism to ensure that it translates to change behavior and that's monitored. And I know that the district is working on that, but they have to have a plan. One of the things that my report calls also, in addition to lack of change management process, the district needs to have project management skills and plans so that everything they can follow through and accomplish what they set forth in whatever plan they set.
Right. Thank you.
My name is Ricardo Adams. I have two daughters in the district. One is under 10 school by Walter Cooper and one East. But you were just talking about change. They need to change the policy and make the parent have to go pay $6 when they come to one of these. They told me this morning no parent could park in the parking lot. We need to change that. We need to really treat parents a little more special. We're talking about wanting them to come down here. And I keep hearing all about this change. One thing we need to start from, parents are not afraid of change. We pray for it. We pray for change. 5 days ago, I think it was, however long ago, but during the Thanksgiving break, my daughters had said it was too long. They were so energetic to get back to school. That was because of what goes on in their school, East High and number 10. They, the social, emotional, and the restorative stuff that's going on with the staff, it changes the whole atmosphere in there. And that's where we got to start. We got to change the atmosphere. And when we talk about change, we need to even look at changes how the state has a big fingerprint over a lot of stuff. This blanket approach of how you address priority schools and all of the schools like that. You can't just be going in there just disrupting all the principles, because all the principles ain't tore up. They ain't. We need to have a more comprehensive, in-depth look at what you do. We just got to take our time with it. We cannot do the blanket approach. And we can't come up in here. Rochester is a city that has professional critics. We have no problem with telling you what's wrong with that system. We ain't got no problem with telling you what's wrong. We need to come up with some right answers, and that's what I'm hoping to hear from y'all. What you're going to support and give us more of. Thank you.
Mr. Thank you, Ricardo. I do agree with your statement, and it's actually highlighted in my report. My report mentioned that I was struck by the fact that the community and staff were keenly aware of the issues facing the district and had great idea on how to solve them, but nothing had happened.
I My name is Sharon Jackson. I'm the principal of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. School. We're a receivership school. We're here, one for persistently struggling. For the last 3 years, we made demonstrable improvements. We have a long way to go. But one of the key issues for making that improvement was the community school model. And as we move forward, I think it needs to be part of ESSA and not just a selection for receivership schools. Because what that community school model did, it allowed people to come and sit at the table and make recommendations. We have a school-based planning team, that's the governance body of the school, but that community school model brought parents' voice, student voice, and community partners' voice. And what was key to everyone sitting at that table, we all put children first. Our interests were put aside. So I just want to make that recommendation that that community school model is a model that the district needs to follow for every school. Not just the PTO, PTA, but that model that sits, look at the data, look at the community, no resources. Parents bring resources to the table that we don't know as educators within that community. And we build a program for all students and every student and family. So I just want to make that recommendation.
Thank you so much for calling out community schools. We also, as a state education department, believe strongly that community schools are an approach that can support many of the things that have been talked about here. Number one, community schools foundationally include community and parents. And they are reflective of what needs come from the community and the parents. So a design of one community school could be very different than another because what that community needs and what can be provided by partners from the community might be very different. We believe that that is a great opportunity. I personally have been out in Rochester talking with schools and districts and supporters from the community. And we need to make sure that there is a focus in Rochester on community schools and providing partnership pathways to support schools as they support the families and the entire community. And I'm talking about healthcare. Rochester is one of the only places that I know of where there is a proactive group of healthcare providers who want to become partners. We've got to make sure that that whole concept is embraced. We bring them forward and support what's happening in our schools and make sure that there are no barriers that are put up by the district and or the schools to have that occur. So we have models here in Rochester that other places would be very anxious to have, and I think it's something that we have not taken full advantage of here, and I do think that it's an extremely important strategy to be used in Rochester.
Thank you, city schools, and started with the freshman class of 450, graduated under 200. So I'm recent enough to where the same problems that exist in Rochester existed for me growing up. That being said, for my daughter, quite frankly, because of my social capital, I have no worries that my daughter can get an excellent education in the city of Rochester. Case in point being that I have experienced none of the problems with special ed described, like due to my persistence, and again, I hate to say social capital. It's one of the biggest problems that the district has. It's really, when people say parental involvement, they're really talking about what amounts to social capital. That being said, looking at this, coming from, with a big background, going back to Syracuse one last time, my grandmother served on the board at Syracuse for 8 years, and my uncle was a assistant superintendent and a contemporary of Jaime Elia, the current superintendent. So I'm fairly well versed over there in the problems that faced against Syracuse city schools. Coming to Rochester now, I guess I just have a couple questions on what's going on with this process.
Can you just narrow it down to one something?
Yep.
Since we have so many thank yous, right?
Okay, so my question really becomes, what are the consequences if the district doesn't follow through with this report? How does this report not just become another failed report? The district meets its requirements, like it meets its requirements, like all districts in the state meet their requirements with receivership schools by renumbering schools or renaming schools, closing them down and reopening them. How does this not just become a check the block and then business as usual continues?
And Commissioner, I'll tie that question to one here similar to that. Like, what type of oversight will the Commissioner provide to the board to ensure that the recommendations are implemented?
So, two things. I want to respond to your comment of receiverships just closing the school down and restarting it. I would venture to say that anybody that is in or been associated with the Kodak Park School here in Rochester knows that that is not all that happened in that school, nor is it all that's happening every single day. And so it's much more than that, and I would urge you to find out about the process and what exactly is included in that to make sure that it isn't just close it down, open up, and business as usual. Because I'm not going to do that, and I'm the commissioner right now. So I can rest assured that's not going to occur in New York State. The second part of your question is, so what are we going to do to make sure it's not just another report? One of the things that we're doing, and I'm not sure any of you have ever experienced this with any of the other multiple reports that were written in Rochester, but it was written, and we're coming out here to talk to you about what was written and about what your ideas are. And you notice you have board members in the audience here who are listening, and you also have dedicated people that work in this district in administrative positions and all other positions. We have representatives from our unions here. Everybody's looking to see what the plan is going to be. The plan comes from the Rochester School Board. The reality of that will be that then we will take the plan, review the plan for what we believe will be the opportunities to move this district. And nothing is off of the table here. And when I say that, there is no change that would be too much to do, because ultimately the children of Rochester's lives are at stake. And we take that very seriously. Regent Norwood, Regent Brown, myself, and Dr. Aquino, and others, many of you in this audience, feel the same way that we do. We have got to make sure that we move this thing forward. So I can tell you from the commissioner's position, and Regent Norwood, and I know we speak for Regent Brown, but Regent Norwood, we're not going to just sit back and let it be the same old, same old. And I don't know exactly how this will play, because if I knew how it was going to play, then why would I be here? Because I'd already know. I'm here to listen, we're here to figure out, and we're here to encourage the board members and the staff here to come back with something that we know and that they can assure us is doable to fix the systemic.
Vicki Robinson. I'm a parent of 2 kids in the city school system at Wilson High School. And I want to say I really appreciate the breadth and depth of the report that you wrote, Dr. Aquino. As I was reading it, I'm like, ooh, nailed that one, got that one, and I participated in one of the focus groups. A couple points that I really felt were important. The transients. I was just speaking with the principal, she's talking about how many different leaders, chiefs she's had in her time. I don't even bother learning chiefs' names anymore as a parent leader. They're meaningless. So that's an important thing to change. And that culture that you talked about, the culture of fear, the culture of incompetence, it's also our own community culture of, oh, well, it's the school district. You can't expect better, whether it's the time that it takes to get transportation reports, the time that it takes to get information. We have come to just accept that. I love when we get a new parent into our parent-teacher organizations or into the school, and they're like, what do you mean? Why can't this happen? What's this for? I'm like, yeah, I need to harness that energy because I've been beaten down. So we need to change our own culture of acceptance of that incompetence. I also want to address the culture of fear, because I think the state has had a part in that culture of fear. There's a great deal of fear of receivership, fear of being labeled a priority school, and that's driven by the high-stakes testing. So my question is, we know from research, Campbell's Law is a real thing. If you measure one thing and focus in on measuring one thing, you're going to get corruption of that measure. You'll get cheating, test prep, extreme test prep, all those things happen, and they're real, they're documented in research. The community realizes that. So what other measures? Your report is a great example of a different measure than strictly test scores. What other measures is the state going to use to identify progress for the district besides those tests? And how are you going to reduce that culture of fear?
So one of the things that I think would be extremely important for you to look at, since you are an active parent, if you would go on our website and read the ESSA plan, if you haven't done that, there are a number of characteristics that are not only academic, although I will say to you that when you give a single test to every child in 6th grade across New York State, and that test is a total of, in a 3-day period, a total of maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours on those 3 days. And you know how every one of the 6th grade kids in New York State performed on that test, then it tells you where there are successes, and it tells you where the schools are not meeting the needs of the children, because you have a comparison. I agree. And so adults control the bad behavior. And let me point that out once again. Adults control bad behavior. And so we don't need to stress out children, and adults are the ones that do that. We have to step back, and there are factors. Let me say this. I am not saying that there isn't some legitimacy and stress on some of the assessments that have been put in place in New York. And I'm happy to say I didn't contribute. However, I am also happy to say I'm trying to take that pressure off. But when you look at all of those 6th grade scores across the state of New York, it tells you something. And that's what we need to be aware of. And that's why, as we're moving forward, our ESSA plan is not based on the punitive side. It's based on, okay, here's where you need some support, and we're going to give it to you. And some of the things that have actually been mentioned today, the concept of community schools, the concept of involvement with parents in the plan, and things like a suspension rate. We shouldn't have kids out of school, because if they're not in school, they can't learn. We got to figure out how to deal with students' behaviors, and that gets us to the social and emotional learning that was mentioned earlier, and that is part of our ESSA plan, because we got to work on how we can support children's good behaviors and start at a young age to develop that. Secondly, I would say another factor that I think is very important is graduation rate. Okay, we work for a very long time with children, and at the end of a 12 to 13 to 14 year period, we should know if they can get out in that 12th year and that 13th year, but we shouldn't give up. And we've got to refocus our attention to make sure every kid gets what they need to be able to be successful when they walk away from Rochester City Schools. Right. So that's in the ESSA plan. There are a number of other things.
So I'll just jump on top of that and say, to close this, what will make this different is if we are understanding we're crafting not a district plan, but a community plan. I would affirm, if you look at the ESSA measures that have been adopted by the board and advanced by state education, it is a very wildly profound and provocative mixed measures approach. We have not built the schema yet. It was part of our debate earlier this week, because there's a lot of work that goes into it. But we are pointed to say there are things about children's lives, their community, as well as their academic performance that needs to go into building a broad dashboard for measuring and assessing school, student, and district performance. I would say for this community, I know Jackie Campbell was here earlier, Rock the Future has been the community's vehicle for saying, how do all stakeholders come together and engage in this cradle to career pathway? And Rock the Future has boldly moved beyond saying test scores are the measure to really having a broad array. We should be working to make sure that whatever emerges in February aligns with Rock the Future, so that as a community, we're beginning to move all of our arrows to point in the same direction, to sequence our own activity. What I'm doing is trying to understand and trying to adopt in my personal life, in my professional life, in my civic affairs. What am I doing and how am I contributing towards it? So my organization has changed all of its measures to align with those Rock the Future measures. That's what we've got to do. Because the way to make sure that this is not a report that sits on a shelf is that each of us every day are owning doing something that makes a difference for kids.
And there's actually a recommendation in the report that the board develop a multi-year strategic plan that will outlive any change in board or any change in leadership, and by doing that, create a citizen-based alliance like Regent Norwood has mentioned that will own this so that it will survive changes in leadership.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here. My name is Kirsten Brown, a parent of 2 children, one at school 12, one at school 53. Relatively new to Rochester, was urged not to move into the district, buy a house here. I did. My husband and I are very much cheerleaders of the Rochester City School District. I thank you for your very detailed report, very transparent, and not to reiterate or beat a dead horse. This is very important. The district needs to very much reconsider how they treat the partnership with parents. For being denied parking when I come to this meeting, I'm being asked to come here and telling me I have to go somewhere else to park where the sign says parent parking, to the time of this meeting, and I understand that you have addressed that. But as you continue to communicate these types of meetings, please make sure that the parents are informed and welcomed. So that's one thing. Also, I want to and I know this, I've read reports on this, and I think this kind of ties into the social emotional, again, the parent, engaging parents, engaging families for academic success. I truly, truly believe in that. I feel like that is the missing piece. These test scores that are coming out, I've had very good, I'd say, experiences, but I think teacher communication is something that could be improved. And communication from the bottom all the way up to the top. I've had meetings with people in this building, with our board, some people I'm still waiting to hear back from. Not you, Commissioner Hallmark, thank you. And lastly, I want to say, I think prioritizing finding qualified teachers of color to teach our students is important. Reports have shown that students do well when they see someone in front of them that looks like them, that can relate to them. And if you cannot, just make sure that our teachers are aware of cultural differences. There are so many biases in the schools that my children are in now that make me cringe. And I don't know really, I want it to go away, but I know it won't go away, so we need to solve that. So I just want to thank you all in advance for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think it's really important to address that issue that you pointed out on the number of minority teachers that we have in our schools. I will say this is an issue clearly across New York State, but across the country. And we have begun to look at some solutions to that, but the solutions come from the profession and the professionals themselves, talking about and sharing the real joy it comes from being involved in schools and working with children to help them to be successful. And so I think one of the things that we really need to do is build our own in Rochester and start with programming that can help our middle school and our senior high students see that this is a great option. There are many resources available for college education for individuals in New York State minorities who will be going into teaching. We need to foster those and make sure we have strong partnerships here in Rochester.
Good morning. My name is Sujata Amaya. I am a Hannah Cohen Fellow at the Criminal Justice Center focusing on education. I've had the great pleasure of working in the community with both the people standing in front of me,
Our community implemented a restorative code of conduct a couple of years ago. It was the result of community effort with an emphasis on what this community needs to heal, and in order to heal, so we can teach our kids the social emotional skills that they need to succeed in life. A large part of what that code of conduct did was remove language that allows disproportionate suspensions for students to occur. The Education Trust came out with a report last week that said in the 2016-17 school year, a student was suspended in a New York school every second. My question to the Commissioner is, Commissioner Elia, would you consider passing a regulation that strips the vague language in Education Law Section 3214 that allows a student to be suspended for insubordination, disorderly conduct, endangering the morals of other students? These kinds of vague languages led to the disproportionate problems that the Code of Conduct was meant to address, the restorative practices the Code of Conduct was meant to implement. What technical support and budgetary support and administrative policy support is NISA going to provide?
Great, that's a great question. Let me point out that each local school district, and I'm so glad that Rochester took the initiative to do that, each local school district does its own code of conduct for students. We are really putting a major agenda together and working across the state on restorative justice training that is available across the state. We are working in conjunction with OCFS, the Office for Children and Families, as well as the Department of Juvenile Justice, to make sure that training is available for districts. It will be rolled out even more as we move forward with the ESSA plan and the call out of the percentage of students by race and by school for out-of-school suspensions. So our role is to shine a light on where things are happening, and the community's role is to say this has to be adjusted. And that's how we get to do what we need to make sure happens in school districts. So as Regent Norwood called out, the dashboard will be a very informative tool for parents and community members and all of our educators to look and see how are the things that are happening in my school and in my classroom reflective of the positive things we see on a dashboard or the negative things we see. And thank you. The financial transparency, I think, is an extremely important component of that. Rochester recently submitted a report to the Division of Budget, and it called out how much funding is spent at each school in the district. And there's been a follow-up study by the Rockefeller Institute on Government on some of those districts, large districts that have high percentages of students that are in poverty, who are in schools that receive a smaller percentage of the funding in the district. Those are all things that need to be used by communities to make decisions on what they're going to put in a code of conduct and where they're going to put resources to support the most at-risk kids. So I would suggest to you that you look at the ESSA plan and see that connection to the very things you talked about. Thank you. We're getting close, so we have probably time for...
When she was a student at Edison Tech. Today, based on your report, my concern as a parent is to see how our board is going to work collectively and to respond to your recommendations. That's number one. It's a problem and a concern when a board member comments that our children's underachievement and our, let's say, our union leadership makes a comment as well to say that the underachievement of our students is because of families and communities. That's a problem. We have not addressed the impact the union has on our district. Our children have been casualties of status quo, politics, and money. And that's just the bottom line for me as a parent. And when we're able to, I have no questions. I'll ask questions. Right now, it's about actions. What is the board working collectively? Because historically, they're not connected. We see it. What are they going to do? Because there is recommendations that need to be addressed by February 2019?
February 8th.
February 8th. So we're ready. The community members and the parents want to know what the board is going to do collectively to act on the recommendations of Dr. Aquino.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we have time for you, ma'am.
So I'm going to be very brief because Regent Norwood did a very good advertisement for Rock the Future. I'm Jaime Aquino for Rock the Future. I have been actively engaged in the community from city government to where I sit now, and I am in school buildings, and I live in the city and all of this. Part of the issue that we have internal to the district around structural racism is because that's an issue that we have in our community. It does not just exist inside of and in our nation, exactly. But it's impacting and it's being manifested in the district, and especially how we treat our youngest resources. So Rock the Future exists as a resource to the district, to the board, to help address some of those issues. We work very closely with the deputy superintendent. But the space that I sit in is how are we going to safeguard our children from the trauma of racism? Because we can do a whole lot educationally and still have children who get to be adults and are still wounded. So that's all my comment.
And thank you for your work. Okay, we're going to take this last one. Sorry we didn't get to everyone, but this last question. And then we'll-
I am Valerie Johnson. I am Valerie. I got it. I've been given. I am Valerie Johnson.
Give the mic. Give the mic. Just hand the mic. Thank you.
I'm Valerie Johnson. I'm a community member. I'm here. I've talked to folk in this room on numerous occasions. But when I walk into a room, I bring my whole race with me. Yes. And none of us are minorities. Now I realize you may have just been using that term, but in the area of education and student-centeredness, our district is black and brown, majority. So we are never less than. And when we use words like minority, we give people permission to treat our children and our parents as though they were less than. So I ask if when you come here, if you could be mindful of that, it would be appreciated.
Thank you.
One of the things in the report that struck me immediately was a correlation between the DSIP plans and state aid. My concern with that, because I believe that state aid has been a co-conspirator with our district, is that state aid accepts our DSIP plans every year. So all of the flaws in those DSIP plans, somewhere in the state ed process, people are allowing that to go through year after year after year, when the community and parents here have always brought up the issue of parent signatures, parent participation, parents knowing what's going on in those DSIP plans. So this goes to accountability. DSIP plans, school-based planning, shared decision-making. The report was very clear in describing some of the programmatic structural issues within our district. But for us as community, where the rubber meets the road, is the phone call I got at 6 o'clock this morning, where a parent called me because her daughter got punched in the face yesterday by a male student in the 9th grade at Edison, and no administrator would talk to her. Rubber meets the road. Rubber meets the road when you have School of the Arts, where my son graduated from, where my kids were automatically going to get the 3 credits that you get coming out of 8th grade going into 9th grade, foreign language, science, math, algebra 1. Whereas at SOTA going on right now, again, they are having an issue with the foreign language teacher, Spanish. Kids are on the track to get their foreign language credit, for 8th grade, but they don't have a qualified teacher. Same thing happened when my son was there. He took Latin. This is an example of cultural problems in the building. In the building. This cannot still be going on. And my son graduated 3 years ago, but it's the exact same thing that a parent told me who has been writing emails, and I told her to go higher than that. Because at the school level, guess what? They've been doing it for years. It's been a practice. But at the higher level, somebody should be held accountable to look down at what is going on in the classroom, in the seats. The other concern for me is there are buildings that have been infested with the last track on the school-to-prison pipeline before you actually put our kids in jail. Leadership Academy, all-boys school. When Linda Simmons was here before, I was involved because the Boys Academy and number 9 school was being forced to fill that school up. So to move our kids from a program that was productive, just because we had an empty building, to move our kids there. We are now dealing with the manifestation of not addressing that at the appropriate level, where we have kids that are being raped, sexually assaulted, sexually abused. We have staff who are mandated reporters, who have not mandatedly reported anything. We have data that is there saying it's not there when it is there. But let's say it's not there. That's a red flag. So why aren't you looking at it? And yet nothing has been done to remove the administrative staff who has been there since Linda Simmons was here before. I spoke with her and took a student in to talk to her. So she cannot say that she didn't know, and I'm not saying that she is going to say that. I'm just saying this is how long ago it was. And she said, I'm not going to change what a previous superintendent did. So she didn't change it. And yet we have a student that was in the paper for raping another student last spring. Right now we have gang members walking up into the building. And yet we still have the same administrators over there who have not done their due diligence with the Dignity for All Act and documenting what has been going on. That's accountability. That is way above what we as parents and community are charged to do. Now I brought it to the attention of everyone in this room prior to right now, and have been bringing it to the attention of people in this room for years. Now you tell me as a commissioner, because I wrote a complaint, a formal complaint back then to the commissioner, and you had just come in. You had just come in. What exactly is it that you think that we're supposed to do as a community, as human beings, for our little black and brown boys in 7th and 8th grade to be sitting out there with administrative staff who is still being coached and coddled, while our kids in the seat are being threatened, assaulted, harassed, bullied? I need you to respond to that.
Yeah, that's right.
So I would say to you, the reason that we have a distinguished educator who came in is to look at the things that we just identified and to make sure that those things don't continue. And as those things, as this lady pointed out, they have to be responded to, and they have to be responded to by everyone appropriately in this community, but particularly in our schools. And that's the reality.
And Ms. Johnson, I would just say, you just added color to my report.
I would one question. Go ahead. I'm sorry, you have me, I think, for last, so.
Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
Regent Norwood, good morning.
Good morning, Jerome.
Dr. Aquino, good morning. We have met. My name is Jerome Underwood. I'm President and CEO of Action for a Better Community. I partner with the district in early education. We're the largest provider of UPK education other than the district. However, I had the privilege and the distinction of serving in this district as a senior administrator for 9 years. A couple of things I want to mention, and I want to be brief because I don't want him to be late.
You know I watch the clock.
Couple of things. There's so much in the report that I'm interested in, and a lot has been talked about, but I want to emphasize some things that a number of people have mentioned today. And that is the relationship that the district has with the community, particularly the parents of this community who are so often, over and over again, dismissed, in my opinion, several reasons. One, just because they're poor. And we know that because people are poor, that means that they lack dignity or they're stupid. And they're, we have so much evidence of the disrespect that's been meted out to parents and families and grandmothers and great-grandmothers. That needs to be addressed, and addressed in a deep, deep way so that all of us, me included, really honor the parents as the leaders of this district, because that's who they are. They butter the bread of everybody who carries the RCSD badge. And I don't think some people really think that when they're coming to work, that is their purpose, to uphold the dignity of the people who they serve. One. Secondly, Dr. Aquino, somebody mentioned earlier, and several people mentioned just the level of institutional, systemic, and surely individual racism in the district. It is no different than the planet. So RCSD is not immune to that. However, in your response to what do we do, you mentioned bias. I want to make the clear distinction that bias and racism are two very, very different things. And while I worked at the district, I spent a lot of time working to counteract racism in all those three forms. There was significant pushback on that. And the word intersectionality tends to come up a lot. But you see racism, and that scourge that it is, again, it's no different. So when we talk about addressing that, and that needs an aggressive response from the crown of the organization to its soul, S-O-U-L. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about, you can't legislate love.
Right.
But I think anybody who can work their salt realize that we actually have to care about these children in order to make them the focus of what we're doing. And if you care for children, you must care for the family from which they come and the community in which they live. And what I saw spending what I call 9 years in the belly of the beast is that many, many people who work here, not all, but many, are very disconnected from our families and our community. I think all of the challenges that the district has, and there are many, I think if we put that, how we interact with people, people's basic humanity. Again, you can't legislate love, but you can sure tell when it's not happening.
Yeah.
Or we can ask the 5-year-olds, they'll tell you.
Yeah.
So I'll leave with that. Thank you for bringing attention to what many of us already knew.
Amen.
But as Ms. Johnson just said, action is what's necessary, and we have to take what's important and now make it urgent. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not going to make a final comment because I'm going to embarrass myself if I do. Thank you all for being here, and I'm going to run and try and get on stage on time. Thank you all.
Drive safe. We're going to take
I will drive safely, yes.
Thank you. My name is John Boutte. I chair the Southwest Common Council Education Committee. And it's too bad. We have been working hard for past 6 years trying to get the neighborhood schools in Rochester in the 19th Ward up and running in good shape. One of the things I remember talking to Wade about was they had tried to sandwich 7 and 8 into School 16, which was not built to be able to accommodate that. And I wondered how it was that, I was wondering why he had supported that at the time, and he said, well, he used to live on Appleton Street, and they used to walk their kids over to School 29, and the thought of having 7 and 8 stay in the same neighborhood was a real plus for what he was seeing as a valuable thing of having a neighborhood school. Unfortunately, what has happened since 2002 in Rochester is the managed school choice policy that was instituted basically says that parents can pick a school to send their child to, and it turns out, well, the state regulations say we'll reimburse you for that trip if it's more than 1.5 miles away from where the child lives. And that has basically devastated neighborhood schools in our community. Parents pick a school that's 1.5 miles away to send their child to. So Mr. Norwood was kind of still thinking of when he was a parent in that neighborhood, but things have changed a lot. And it's really important for you who are in Albany to change the regulations for reimbursement to match what has been done. And I'm told that the managed school choice program was started as a result of the No Child Left Behind program, trying to have a semblance of equity that all parents could send their child to a good school. Unfortunately, there were other things that didn't quite work out. But really, we need to have a situation where parents can send their child to a school that's 4 or 5 blocks away and have the sense of safety of a bus ride. And if we're spending if we're sending 80% of our kids on bus rides that are 1.5 miles or more away, we certainly can't be spending more money if we send 100% of them to a 3 or 4 block ride.
Okay. Let me just want to clarify one thing. It isn't just a regulation, that's the law that is determined how we get reimbursements for transportation. But the determination of whether or not you're going to have a school choice program that provides transportation is a local decision. So the school board would have made that decision, and that's how that was put into place. If there's going to be a change in that has to do with the student assignment program, and again, that's a local choice. So the rule about how the reimbursement is done is not something that's under regulation. That's determined by the legislature and the governor under the Department of the Budget. But we, as state ed, are the ones that are told how to implement it. So that's the difference in the point that you made. But the determination of how students are assigned, whether you have community schools, whether children in the neighborhood around the community schools can go to that school, that is a local decision. I want to thank you, sir. I want to just take this opportunity to thank all of you for taking the time to come out today to talk to us. Please keep in mind, within the next few days, we will have a schedule out for additional community meetings that we will have at other places in the community, and that will be published for people and at different times of the day so that we can make it easier for those individuals and parents that may want to do a nighttime meeting or a late afternoon meeting. So thank you very much. I appreciate, as the commissioner, I appreciate your involvement and time that you spend to be here to talk about what we need to do collectively to support the students of Rochester. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.